The Defence Secretary, Penny Mordaunt, is today to announce a new package of measures to provide better support and stronger legal protections for serving and former members of the armed forces. The measures will look to ensure that service personnel facing investigation over alleged historical offences are not subjected to repeated investigations many years after the events in question. Well, for more on this, Johnny Mercer, a member of the Defence Select Committee, Conservative MP, joins us now live from Westminster. Mr Mercer, very good morning to you. Of course, we're waiting to hear the detail of what Penny Mordaunt is going to be consulting on. But in terms of the broad brushstrokes of it, one imagines that you're in favour.
Well, yeah, I think it's a good start. I think, you know, it's a pretty basic principle, really, that these guys should be protected from repeated investigations where there's no new evidence, where people have been investigated already. And it's encouraging, you know, it's certainly an encouraging start, but we need to make sure this is applied equitably to both sides, and let's see where we go with it.
What is it about either current or former membership of our armed forces that means that they should be treated in a different way to you or I in civilian stream?
Nobody's asking for that at all. The issue is that obviously by the nature of conflict, there will be those who are unhappy with the result at the end of that conflict, and will seek to continue it through lots of different means, and certainly in some ways will be the courtroom. The reality is that so-called lawfare has no place in this. This idea that you can continuously rake the coals for the next 50 years, drag pensioners out of their beds to come and face allegations for which they've often been investigated before, is patently unfair. It doesn't happen in any other country in the world, and I want us to see it put a stop to it here.
Well, I'm not so sure it doesn't happen in any other country around the world. I can think of one in which we have, over the past few years, regularly seen pensioners brought to trial for alleged war crimes.
So which country are you referring to?
Germany.
Yes. Okay. So I'm not sure comparing the British Army to the actions of the Third Reich is particularly fair.
That wasn't my point, Mr Mercer. You know that. What I'm saying is we have seen circumstances in which historical allegations have resulted in old men sitting in the dock, and they have ended up being convicted. I'm just wondering why that would not be something that you, as a former member of our armed forces, would not want to see. If someone has committed a crime whilst wearing the uniform, you would be first in line calling for them to be prosecuted.
This is one of the really frustrating things about the debate, really, Niall, because there's such a fundamental misunderstanding of A, what's going on, and B, what is required to fix it. Nobody on any level is looking for those who break the law to be given any sort of amnesty or never be held to account. Actually, if you see that happen on operations, you want that dealt with as swiftly as possible, because you do everything you possibly can to uphold the ethos and the values of the organisation you're looking to represent in the country which you're fighting for. But this idea, I think, that people are asking for that, I think is really unhelpful, because it's quite painful, obviously, for the families, particularly those who are seeking some sort of some sort of clarification over events that have happened many years ago. It's not about that. It's about repeated investigations, where investigations have already taken place, where people are not happy with the results of those investigations, however fair they may have been, and make continual attempts to try and reframe evidence that has been presented already in an attempt again to bring another prosecution. Well, I'm afraid the chances of prosecution are so low because the evidence is simply not there. If it was there, it would have been presented at the time and people would have been convicted. It's unfair to all sides, and the only people who are enjoying this process, who are making something of it, are legal teams. We've seen the crass abuses of this process in Iraq, and we've got to stand up for these people and not get mired in this nonsense of asking for an amnesty for people who've served, because nobody's asking for that.
No, indeed, and that was not my suggestion. And certainly the kind of the evidentiary threshold that Penny Mordaunt is going to be talking about, that if there is to be a repeat prosecution, it has to be there has to be new and compelling evidence, I think is something that will please you. But the idea, though, that Northern Ireland would be a special set of circumstances under Penny Mordaunt's plans. What do you make of that?
Yeah, look, Northern Ireland represents a particular challenge. The way that conflict was framed in, at the time, it was military assistance to the civil authority. It was not classed as a war, even though it had many sort of traits of wartime activity, if you like. We need to redouble our efforts and see what we can do to apply legislation to stop this process taking place. There's a lot of politics at work here, and you often hear what people are prepared to accept or not prepared to accept in Northern Ireland, and I accept, and I understand that side of the argument, but I'm afraid, these are our people, these are our veterans who served our nation, and on this side of the sea, I'm afraid they're going to have people standing up for them as well. So we need to find a fair solution. Nobody's looking for an easy way out. Nobody's looking to cover anything up. But we have to be realistic and mature and come to a solution that stops a process of this conflict being endlessly dragged out through the courts, so that people can move on to a bright future, which I know most people in Northern Ireland want to do.
Indeed. Johnny Mercer, always good to talk. Thanks for joining us. The number of small garden birds has increased this year thanks to a mild winter, which made it easier for them to find food. There's some people, long-tailed tits, cold tits. This is horrible. Long-tailed tits, cold tits and great tits are on the rise.
This is a nature story. Why is everybody
But the RSPB has warned that many garden birds are still struggling, and that's the important point here. More than 500,000 people took part in the Big Garden Bird Watch over a weekend in January, and between them they counted over 8.2 million birds of a variety of species in hour-long surveys of gardens and parks.
A producer is going to be in real trouble for picking out all those names for you to read.
There are so many birds around that are not from that particular genus.
Variety is a very important variety of bird and should be studied a lot. It's a very important to develop.
Just leave it at that.
No, I like bird watching.
We have to find a lighter story in a day of rather grim news.